Welcome to the Family Builders Podcast. No matter what our family dynamic is, we can all use some help from time to time. Our hope and prayer is that this podcast is a help and a blessing to you each and every week. And now our host, Pastor David Moore, and co-host, Pastor A.J. Harold.
Hello, welcome to the Family Builders Podcast. This is your host, Pastor David Moore from Lakeview Baptist Church in Newcastle, Oklahoma. And we're recording here tonight for a little bit later than we normally do, just because of our guests, which we're excited to have this evening. But before we get to them, let me introduce my co-host, as always, my faithful friend, high atop the Hollywood Hills in his Crystal Studios, Pastor A.J. Harold. Brother A.J., how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Again, looking forward to this week's episode.
Amen. Amen. Well, it's good to be back and hope everyone had a good Valentine's last week and enjoyed the special visit from our wives, the wives of the hosts here, as they came on the show and with us. And we just had a good time visiting and fellowshipping and talking about getting married. And in keeping with that same topic this week, we wanted to talk about the things that lead up to a long and healthy marriage, and that is at the start of a relationship. And so we just happen to have a couple in my family that are in that particular situation in life. So welcoming this evening my youngest son, David, and his fiance, Emily Isa. Welcome to the podcast, you two.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So David is a police officer in a local town here. Emily is the daughter of another pastor in town, and their relationship began just a little over almost a year and a half ago, I guess.
Yeah.
Right about that. They actually met at the wedding of David's older sister, where he was, of course, doing brother stuff, and Emily was the piano player at that wedding. So they met there, but we're glad to have them today. We're going to be talking with them a little bit about single life as a Christian. There's this idea that, you graduate high school and then you go off to Bible college and you meet your spouse for life at Bible college. And that's just kind of the pattern that a lot of people work in. But I realized one day, out of my 5 kids that my wife and I have, only one of them met their spouse at Bible college. And of course, Brother Harold's kids are a little bit younger. Of course, Brother Harold is a little bit younger, so that helps. But and I'm sure, AJ, that you appreciate that, right?
I do. I was going to let you keep talking, but hey, I'm just...
I'm not going to go on confidence here. But yeah, his kids are a little bit younger. They've not quite reached that stage yet, but different ones have different ideas, and it's not God's will for everybody to go to Bible college. And so then the question becomes, well, if I go to a small independent Baptist church, how am I going to meet my spouse if I don't go to Bible college? Or if I'm maybe someone who gets saved later on in life and is single, and they're past the stage of going to college. Maybe they already went to college and graduated for their career or whatever. And, how are they going to meet the spouse that God has for them? Well, I think if we start looking at things like Bible college as the only way a person can ever meet somebody, that's a problem. That's an integral part of our church life problem, if that's what we're looking at Bible college for. So David and Emily did not meet that way. And they're doing okay so far, right?
Yeah, it's worked out for
how many days till the wedding?
42.
42. All right. You notice she knew that, but he didn't know that. He immediately looked to her as if to say, "That's all you." So, but 42 days, they'll be getting married, and we're excited for them. I want to start off by asking this question, and I'm going to kind of direct the question to Emily, because Emily did go to college for 4 years. Was there, when you graduated, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, was there any concern because you graduated and you saw your friends from college getting married and stuff? Was there any concern on your part? Well, what am I going to do? How am I going to find a husband?
As soon as I was graduating college, I wasn't too worried about it. I will admit, I think there was only like 2 or 3 girls that graduated out of missions program that didn't get married directly out of college.
Right.
And of course, I was one of them. But at the time, I was just like, I don't know, I was happy to be graduating, and life was changing for us. My dad was taking the pastorate like the same month as that happening. So that was a pretty big distraction in my life to help offset that. After it went on, I got probably more concerned a year or so down the road, but I mean,
Yeah.
you just kind of keep going to things. You just keep doing what you're supposed to do. And
I want to clarify, here, if we say something like, going on a date or being in a courtship, people will use different words meaning the same thing. And so we're not talking about the world's perspective of dating here. And I know Brother AJ and I have talked about this because his kids, some of them are teenagers still. And, there's sometimes this push, for young kids to be pushed into the boyfriend, girlfriend realm. Somebody gets to college age and they've had 14 boyfriends if it's a girl, or, 23 girlfriends if it's a boy, or whatever. And none of that is really appropriate. In my opinion, none of that is really appropriate, because the purpose for what we're calling dating here, the purpose of this is finding the person that God has for you to be married to, right? I mean, Brother AJ, would you agree that we're not talking about dating from the world's perspective of just, quote, having fun, unquote?
Yeah, I like to dub myself as the word nerd. And so there's 2 words here I'd like to define really quick. The word date, it's a simple word. It is the time when any event happened, when anything was transacted, or when anything is to be done. So a date is an opportunity to just get to know someone. It's not the end of the world. But to me, the core value for believers is the motive. It is the motive behind the date or the courtship. And even the word courtship just means the act of wooing in love or solicitation of a woman to marriage. Basically, letting her know that my desire is not just to hang out and have popcorn, but there's an end in mind here. And so here is the key, in my opinion, is motive. Motive is defined as that which incites to action. So I'm not just going on random dates with random girls, that's completely off the table, in my opinion. The motive for a believer is to honor God. And in doing so, I may get to honor God with you. And so the motive is what we're after as believers.
Yeah, that's good. People can say things and they mean well, but they come across incredibly rude sometimes. Like Emily graduating from Bible college, I don't know if this ever happened. She's never said anything about it, but I've seen instances where somebody will be in a situation where they graduate from Bible college, maybe they're 20, 25, 30 years old, and somebody come up to them and say, "Oh, don't worry, I'm sure you'll someday meet somebody," and they mean well, but it's almost taking the same idea of, it's up to you to meet somebody, that God's not going to help you, right? And no, we're not Calvinists here. We don't believe in God moving his robots around piece by piece across the board. But we do believe that God is a sovereign God, and he has someone for you. And the idea here is, if you are obeying God and if you are serving God, then you're going to be in a position for God to bring you to the person that he wants for you. So in addition to the question about, did you have any concerns when you graduated from Bible college, I would also ask them, based on what we just defined as dating, when you two, and I'm going to ask David this first, when you two began this relationship, dating, did you have the mindset of, Lord, is this the person I'm supposed to marry? I'm not necessarily expecting an answer the first day, but did you go into it with that mindset?
My situation was different from hers. I didn't go to Bible college. During that time when we first met, I was kind of transitioning. A little bit before that, I was kind of falling off the path a little bit, doing some things I shouldn't have. And so I was kind of flipping things around, getting back on the right road and doing what I was supposed to do. And not to sound cheesy or new agey, but I was really just focused on myself and like, okay, Lord, there's a lot going on in the world. I know you put me here for a reason. I'm trying to figure that reason out. And so I was really focusing on myself and my personal relationship with the Lord. And I wasn't wasn't even looking for a relationship or thinking about that at that time. And then next thing I know, I go to a wedding and there's this really, really pretty piano player there. And my brother,
Just to be clear, we are talking about Emily.
yes,
Okay.
yes, Emily. And my brother was like, dude, there's no reason that you aren't talking to her. I was like, man, that's not really what I'm, looking for right now. Like, I'm just kind of going with what I got because I was looking at joining the military and getting ready to start my career in law enforcement stuff. So that wasn't really at the forefront of my mind. And he goes, well, that's kind of foolish. Like, if she's here, man, go for it. And I was like, talking myself out of it. Like, there's no way. Like, she's got to be like dating somebody. There's got to be like more to it because I didn't really know her super great at the time. And so then they're like, hey, we're going to go to dinner with that family. And I was like, okay, so you're like purposely setting this up, whatever. But I was like, I'll take it. So we go and we're sitting with her two younger sisters, my grandma and my aunt. And I'm trying to talk to Emily, and my grandma and my aunt wouldn't stop interrupting us. Like, oh, can you shut up? Like, I'm trying to work here. But no, it worked out, and she was really amazing, and I really liked the conversation that we had. But I was like, Lord, this isn't really what I was looking for. And I remember I was talking to my buddy about it, and he said, man, if you're really serious about following Christ and your life for that, God designed marriage so that the woman will support the man to achieve his purpose in life for Christ. And he's like, if you think she'll help you with that, then absolutely go for it. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And so we started talking a little bit more, and the more I started to get to know her, the more I started to realize that she was going to be supportive and helping me go closer to Christ. So that was kind of my intent, was when we first started talking, was, hey, are you actually going to be supportive and help me growing closer to Christ and fulfill my purpose?
And if I remember right, David, when you asked Emily's dad for permission to spend time with her, that was one of the questions he asked you as well, wasn't it? What your end game was.
He was very specific, kind of the same thing you guys just talked about. Hey, we don't date just for fun. We date for a purpose. And he used the word courtship, but with the same meaning, kind of as we talked about before. But yeah, that was one of his main questions.
So Emily, that was your intent as well. Again, not necessarily that first day, but when you began talking to him and spending a little bit of time with him, it was in your mind, Lord, is this the one for me?
I mean, I didn't have all this foreknowledge that he liked me at the wedding. I didn't know any of that. I wasn't even trying to talk to him at dinner. I was like, man, I have to clean up this wedding after I played the piano, and now we're going to dinner. And then I remember he sent me, or he followed me on Instagram, and then he sent me a message, but I didn't see it till 3 days later, as I just wasn't accustomed to using it that much. And so I was at work, and I was like, why is this kid talking to me? That's exactly what I said. And then we did what all girls do, and we had a whole board meeting on what I should say back. But after that, after we kind of started talking to each other, after a while, it just we just started talking, and then that was a year and a half ago, and there hasn't been a day we haven't talked since. And so as I got closer, I was like, wow, realized I was having more different feelings toward it, and so I just started praying about it. God didn't object, my parents didn't object, so.
Okay, well, good.
I want to interject something because both of you, in a unique way, your own way, said the same thing. Both of you said you were one was getting closer to the Lord, one was just serving the Lord at a wedding, but you were doing what you were designed to do. You weren't necessarily looking for anything, but God brought it along your way. And I just want to encourage our listeners, because I know a lot here in California, you guys are in the same boat. You're really desiring to be married. But at the same time, I always say, be like Adam. Just do what God has designed you to do, and God will bring along the way your Eve. So I appreciate both of your testimonies that you were just kind of not looking, and then it happened. I love that.
It's so funny that you bring that up, because in my notes here, when David was talking, I wrote key, focusing on his relationship with the Lord. You're not focused on, I got to find a wife, or I got to find a husband. I got to be right with God. He'll bring the person into your life. That's excellent. And I mentioned too about David asking Emily's dad for permission to spend time with her and have a relationship with her. What parts have your parents played in your ongoing relationship and in the development of your relationship? Emily, why don't you go first with that one?
We, of course, before we officially started talking to each other or spending time with each other, we got both of our parents' permission. And then they come with us to basically all of our events. We pretty much stay chaperoned by one set of parents or the other.
And at
Both
the
of our
beginning,
parents
we
are
had
pastors,
your whole
so-
family over for dinner.
Yeah.
And we kind of talked as the two families and said, okay, here's the relationship, here's where the relationship could be going, and here's what we want to see from both parties along the way. And that was, I think that was really important. And maybe sometimes for the sake of distance, you can't do that, but it's a good idea if you can.
And for our listeners, can you guys throw your ages out there if you don't mind? Because what you're saying sounds really quote unquote cute for a teenager, but you're not teenagers. You're young adults, and yet you both got your parents involved. So I think that's important as a good example for others. So roughly what ages were you when you met?
I was 24.
I was 20.
And the funny thing about the parents aspect of it, Brother Isom, Emily's dad, we were at a pastor's meeting, and they had all the pastors stand up and tell where they were from. And I had not met Brother Isom before, and he stood up, and he's just a big old Okie, and from Oklahoma, and he stood up, and in that Oklahoma accent, he said, "I'm T.J. Isom, and I got my wife here," and he says, "I got my 3 daughters over here. I sure wish somebody would come along and marry them." Well, let me tell you, that was a different story when someone came along and was really wanting to marry them, but he wasn't quite as enthusiastic, because it is hard as a parent. My wife and I have 2 daughters, and it was really hard to know that they were going to leave, take someone else's name. I remember when my oldest daughter, I forget how old she was, and she wanted a new Bible for Christmas, and so we bought her a Bible and had her name emblazoned on it. And I remember looking at that Bible with her name on it before I gave it to her and thinking, she's going to get married someday. She's going to have some other guy's last name. And I mean, I'm having a full-on meltdown, and she's like 12, but I was having a full-on meltdown because of that. And so I understand what it is as a dad to go through that, but I also understand, what we want for our kids is for them to have the happiness of serving the Lord with their family, like what we've had. And what I decided with my sons-in-law, I said, okay, I can either have an antagonistic relationship with them, where I'm always resentful of them for taking my daughter, or I can be a part of their lives and I can become friends with them. And so both of my sons-in-law, I'm very good friends with. Now it's still a relationship of father-in-law and son-in-law. But like my oldest daughter, her husband, he was my assistant pastor before he was my son-in-law. And the church I was at, I was the pastor, he was the assistant. And so we spent a lot of time together in teaching scenarios and things like that. But when it came time for him to ask for her hand in marriage, my exact words were, "I've trusted you with the pulpit in my church. I can't not trust you with my daughter." And I made it very clear to him, as long as you make her happy, I'll be your best friend. And I also mentioned I'm from Chicago. I know how to get rid of a body if I have to. But I made it very clear to him. I'll be your, and I can say today, he and I are very good friends. And in fact, he was a guest on our podcast recently. My younger daughter and her husband, same kind of thing. So you keep my daughter happy, and I'll be your best friend. And it's important, I think, for parents to love the child-in-law as much as they love the child, because those two are going to become one.
Yeah, I agree. And to the parents like me who aren't yet basically running this part of the course of their lives, please take good notes. Realize that it starts now. I have 6 daughters. My oldest is 22, and then Sonata's my youngest, just a 6-year-old. And yet I'm taking notes. Even though I'm the one interviewing on this podcast, I'm learning from this. So now's the time to start. Somebody said the starting line's always in front of you. So
that's right. I'm just thinking about paying for 6 weddings, brother. Listeners, pray for Brother Harold. He's got a lot going in from. So back to the question about parents, David. You didn't get a chance to answer that.
Yeah, say kind of along those lines is, if you're a guy like starting to get into a relationship with a girl, it's important to be respectful of the parents. I know at times it can seem like it's hard to build a relationship and have, important conversations that you need to have to build a relationship and know if that's the right person for you to spend the rest of your life with. If their parents are always, looming in the background, watching and listening to what's going on. But it's important to respect them and respect their house and respect their rules, because at the end of the day, they are still in charge of you, and it's important to respect that and appreciate the fact that they are there to help you grow your relationship the right way. They've always been extremely supportive, her parents and mine, so I'm really appreciative of that.
Genesis chapter 2, of course, this is the Lord. He's created all creation, and he's created Adam. And Brother Harold has pointed this out, where this is the only thing the Lord said I need to fix. Everything else he created was good, but he saw it was not good for man to be alone, so he's going to create woman. And it says in verse 23 of Genesis chapter 2, and Adam said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Now, a lot of people don't look at it this way, especially in today's society, but I think it's really important to address the fact that there is a biblical principle here of children, which you two are, or David is my son, Emily is TJ and Christy's daughter. You're the children of somebody until you're married. And so that leaving the father and mother is not to happen until you're married. There's too often we see young people in their 20s and we say, oh, well, they're in their 20s, they're adults, and they are, but you're also still answerable to an authority. Whereas once you get married, you make that transition to become the authority in your lives. But even then, because you've had that whole lifetime of building that relationship, your parents are still there for advice, for help, for comfort, for whatever you need. But now it's for you to produce. So I think we're maybe too quick to cut those strings, I think, sometimes.
And I would say, parents, you can also have the flip side where it's like your parents have always been there, and so then now you're married. I can tell from a personal experience, one of our cousins had an issue where he was like asking his parents permission to take a girl out, and they were like, you're your own person now. You guys got to figure that out on your own. So I think it's important to realize, like, in our stage of relationship, we've had this conversation a few times, like, hey, coming up soon, we're going to be on our own, making our own, big boy decisions and doing our own thing. So obviously they're still there for advice and they're still there to help you out, but man, they can't be your parents forever. They can't make decisions for you the rest of your life. They'll get real annoyed with you. So.
Right. Yeah, there has to be a definite transition where the parents go from the decision maker, the authority, to the advice giver, the comforter.
Yeah. I always say Ephesians 6:1 says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. You're getting ready to switch to verse 2. Honor thy father and thy mother. You're at the point now, and I'll just give you a quick example. When we left Los Angeles, I was in the military. We left Los Angeles. My parents were ecstatic. They were so glad to get us out of LA. And they end up moving to Nashville, Tennessee. Everything's great. I get out of the military, tell my mom and dad, I really believe the Lord is leading me back to Los Angeles. And they're like, no, we did everything we could to get all of our heralds out of there. But what I did was disobey them. Mom and dad, I know God wants me there. But in obeying God, I actually honored them. And then they got right and eventually joined the team. The point is, but the point is, you guys are in that weird window of, this is my mom and dad, but this is my fiance, my wife to be, my husband to be. So you're in this transition of obey to always honor. When mom and dad pass, you still honor them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But I wanted to also ask you guys, this is kind of more in keeping, it's the month of February. Last week we had our wives on. We told the story of how we met and all that good stuff. So at what point in your relationship did you know? Because a lot of the questions I get asked by people over the years as a pastor, how will I know when it's real? How will I know I'm in love? How will I know this is the one? So start with you, David, this time. How did you know? Besides, wow, there's this really pretty girl playing the piano, right?
I would say kind of once we started to talk and I realized that she wasn't completely disgusted by me.
That helps if she's willing to at least have a second conversation.
Right, and we went on the first date and she didn't talk to me. She was like, nervous and uncomfortable. She like didn't talk to me. And then we went on a walk afterwards and we actually started to talk a little bit. And it was amazing. And I got home and I was like, all right, what's going on? So I texted her. I was like, hey, I had fun. She goes, yeah, me too. And I was like, would you be okay with another date? She said, absolutely. And I was like, we're green to go, man. Like, let's go. So after that, we started to actually like build a relationship from there and get to know each other. And the more that I realized, like, not only does like directly does she help me real close to Christ, but she just knowing that she's there and knowing that one day, because we obviously our intentions from the beginning were, is this going to be for the rest of our lives? Knowing that that could be the end goal, knowing that one day I could be responsible for her, just constantly in the back of my mind was I have to be a better person and I have to be closer to Christ and I have to be the best man that I can be to take care of her and help her. The more that grew close to me and the fact that she was always on my mind, constantly in my prayers, and no matter what I was doing, I just felt like the Lord was laying her on my heart. I kind of knew that, okay, this is probably the person for me. And then we had some more serious conversations. I was like, hey, this is kind of what I think the Lord wants for me to do. This is kind of the career field that I want to be going on. There's kind of a stigma in first responders that the people crazier than them is the people who are willing to marry them. And so once she was like, yeah, I'll support you in that. And, if that's what the Lord wants for you, I'm supportive all the way. And that's when I started to realize, like, yeah, she's the one for sure.
That is a real important thing because, I know Brother Harold and I have seen pastors who have gotten married, become, they weren't pastors, they've got married and then became pastors. And even if they, followed the magic paradigm, went to Bible college, met her freshman year, dated the second year, got married at the end of the junior year, then went finished as a married student and graduated and then went and, did everything just exactly so. But then they get into the ministry and for whatever reason, the wife, the pressures, the demands, and the wife says, that's it, I'm done, and leaves. And there should have been a conversation at some point. Hey, these are the demands of the work that God has called me to. And David's work in law enforcement is, and it's something we don't really like to talk about, but it's a fact. It's very dangerous. I will tell you, as a parent of two men that are in law enforcement, I don't like the fact that they chose career fields that are that dangerous. I don't like waking up in the middle of the night wondering if they're okay. I mean, they're adults now. I shouldn't have to do that. It's one thing when they were 5 and I had to wake up in the middle of the night and say, are they okay? Now they're adults and I wake up in the middle of the night and let me tell you, it's far worse than when they were 5. So, Emily, let me ask you, and again, this is not really a pleasant conversation, but, have you given full consideration and how have you dealt with that in your decision that, yes, he's the one?
So I guess when I was younger, I always thought there'd be some like light bulb moment or that I would just know. But it was as our like relationship went on, I was praying about it because I wasn't trying to like get myself hurt unnecessarily. And so we would just I would pray about it, and then God just kind of gave me peace about it. And the more we looked back at our relationship and like even just the recent couple years of our lives, if we would have tried to get together even a year or so before, it would have never worked out.
Right.
Like for so many reasons. And just neither one of us would have been ready. And so the way everything just came together, the time it did, even though I thought it was like too late or whatever, it just, the way everything lined out, it really couldn't have been anything else but God.
Cool. That's awesome. Yes, Dave.
Kind of touching on that as far as like if it was a few years before, I think looking back, there's a huge change that I can see personally between 18 and 20, almost 21. And now 21, almost 22, there's even a bigger change. I think that's important to realize because you go to Bible college, you're 17, 18, 19. You're like, man, I'm a big guy on campus, right? I'm 18, I'm an adult. I vote now.
Yep.
And you're on your own. You're far from your parents. And, everyone else is starting to date. So you're like, all right, I'm going to try this thing out. And it's easy to fall into a relationship that maybe you're not supposed to be in.
Yeah.
And I think timing and stuff like that is very important. I think especially as a pastor's kid and she wasn't a pastor's kid her whole life, but they were always in the ministry at some point. You have to grow up fast. You tend to, not necessarily miss out. And I don't want this to come off like I'm upset with my childhood or like I feel like I missed anything. I'm ecstatic with what I've had my whole life, and it's made me the man that I am. But the fact of the matter is, you have to grow up and you have to take responsibility. I mean, I was 14 years old working as many hours as I could at McDonald's to help provide because our church was really small and going through some struggles. I was helping babysit my niece, and I was in high school. So I had a lot going on, and I never really had like, oh, it's Saturday, I'm not going to do anything. No, there was always a million things. You had ministry, you had getting ready for church on Sunday, you had work, you had all this other stuff. So we tend to grow up really fast. And so I think that also plays a part where you go out to Bible college and you're like, oh, I'm an adult now. I can do what I want. And I've already done all this other stuff. And there's a lot more to learn. And maturity plays a huge part,
Yeah.
growing
Yeah.
up like
I can say, having watched you two close up, I have seen a big difference in both of you. Less so in Emily. She was already pretty good, but I've seen a real big change in David, and that's just because he's my son. He actually used to live with me. Now, of course, he doesn't. But which is the way it's supposed to be. I know. But anyways, it's good to hear you verbalize that aspect of it. The difference between an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old. The difference between a 20-year-old and a 22-year-old. You say, well, that's only 2 years, but it's a big 2 years. And Brother Harold, I think you were in the military during that time range, right? If I'm not mistaken. So
Yes.
I'm sure you saw that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just got married, first child, joined the military, and it's like, I don't even know how to explain it. Warp speed maturity. Uh, but I'd like to encourage you guys because that's a great thought, David. 2 Peter 3:18 says, "But grow in grace and in the knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. To him be glory both now and forever." And it ends with amen. If you guys realize here in April, when you guys tie the knot, as they say, when you get married, if you realize your number one job is to bring God glory, even in your marriage, then when you hit the rocks, or at least approach the rocks, you won't even hit them because you'll watch the lighthouse. You'll watch Jesus. He'll shine his light, allowing you to help each other. Marriage is honorable above all. I read that somewhere. Honorable above all. And so I'm listening to you as a father, and I'm excited because I do have some who are behind you in age, but they also are listening to this podcast here when we record or post it. But I'm thankful for you, and I just want to encourage you to continue to grow individually and then grow together. I have to throw this in there. When we got engaged, I wanted to get my wife a really special ring. Duh, what guy doesn't? But I found a ring that was actually in earrings there at the diamond store. And the lady said, "Oh, we don't use those for rings. They're too weak to put a band around them and you'll lose the diamond." And so the jeweler said, "Well, I can kind of rig something for you that'll make it work." And it's called a trilliant. It's a diamond in the shape of a triangle. So triangle, brilliant, trilliant. And when I saw that, immediately I knew if I had a good relationship with the Lord and she had a good relationship with the Lord, then our relationship with each other will be fine. But if ever I break my relationship with the Lord or her, it would be some chaos where they're supposed to be cosmos. And so I would highly encourage you to have that individual secret place time. And to our listeners too, I'm not just picking on you two for marital counseling here on our podcast. But
Right.
our listeners, it's so important that you have a relationship with the Lord. And I'm going to end with this, Brother Moore, and throw it back to you. I know our time is almost up, but I always tell our people when I do marital counseling, if you in your core love Jesus and she or he in his core loves Jesus, then you'll be fine. You're going to have issues, but in your core, I'm not going to doubt at all the promises of God. And we're going to forgive, we're going to move forward, etc. So I'm excited for you. Big cheerleader here in California in my Crystal Palace or whatever he says here in California.
So as Brother AJ mentioned, we're getting close on our time. So real quick, just want to ask you guys, because we do have single listeners, not just younger, but we have some in their 20s, some in their 30s, maybe even some in their 40s. What advice would you give to someone who's single right now and doesn't intend to go to Bible college or already did or whatever the situation is? They're not going to find a spouse in Bible college. What advice would you give to them? They want to get married. What would you tell them to do to find the mate God has for them?
I would probably say just to be faithful in what you're doing, and then remember when you're looking at people that you're going to be an example of people behind you. Like Brother Hill keeps bringing up his 6 kids that are younger,
Right.
and like I have 2 younger sisters and like cousins and girls in my church that will watch me to see what I'm supposed to do. So if you're looking at a relationship and you're not sure, just think like, okay, what I want, like, and just imagine some kid in your church, like, would I let them do this, or would I think that would be a good idea? And if you know the answer is no, or you know that you would be telling them or counseling them against it, it's obviously not good for you too. So that was something that was really helpful for me whenever I was like coming around, just remembering that you're an example and they are watching you, and
It's good.
be right.
What you do?
I'd say, man, don't rush it. I know when you turn 18, you feel like there's a timer and you gotta beat the clock, right? But I would say, be a kid, man. If you're young, you're not 18 yet, or if you are 18, enjoy being 18, enjoy being young, enjoy being a kid. It tends to grow up too fast, especially like even in the secular world, man. People grow up way too quick. Just enjoy being young. You'll miss it when you get older, I'm sure. I haven't experienced that yet, but
I miss it.
yeah, just enjoy being young. Don't rush it. And I think if you're constantly looking, you won't find it. But if you start to focus on yourself and your relationship with Christ, then he'll put that when he's ready and when it's supposed to be the right time. And then, kind of from personal experience, if you make a mistake and you do something wrong, the Lord is always just to forgive you and will
Amen.
always help bring you back. So don't get too discouraged. If you're kind of teetering on the edge, don't do it. It's not worth it, man. But if you've already done it, the Lord will always forgive you. You just have to make things right, and it'll work out in the end. Just trust Him.
You know, I was just thinking, as David was talking about, enjoy being the age that you are. You know, there is this mindset when you're 15, you want to be 16. When you're 16, you want to be 17. When you're 17, you want to be 18. When you're 18, you want to be 19. And there's a point where, you know, when you're 30, you wish you were 29 again. When you're 56, you wish you were 8. You know. So, but there is implied in that a lack of contentment with where God has you in life. So for those that are younger, you know, yes, be content with being the age that you are. God made you that age. For those that are older, even maybe you're content with your age, but you're not content with where you're at in your relationship in life. Well, wait a minute. Has God got you in that particular stage for a reason? So being content with where God has you. And I have found personally in my life, when I'm discontented with where God has for me, God's not using me. But when I'm content with where God has me, God's using me. So I hope this has been a help to our listeners and a blessing. I just want to thank David and Emily for taking the time to be on here this evening. I have to go buy them dinner as payment. I don't normally pay our guests, but I have to go buy them dinner. So looking forward to some time together. But
That's
just want
on
to
top
say,
of the hourly rate.
right, yeah. Right. I just want to say I appreciate you too, and looking forward to see what God has for you. We love you both, and thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
It's been fun.
Brother AJ, why don't you take us out?
Sure. Thank you for listening to the Family Builders Podcast. Please subscribe and share this week's podcast with your friends and family. Also, if you have any questions for either of us, please do not hesitate to email us at familybuilderspodcast@gmail.com. Who knows? Maybe we'll even answer your question on one of our future episodes. Until next time, Family Builders, never let up.